I see it across the board. Whether it's London, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds. It is becoming a bit of a problem for nightlife venues.
A lot of the good places to go, especially in underground music, are going.
There was always this worry hanging over the venues' heads that, oh, when are we going to close? When's the venue going to be sold?
A very difficult and interesting time for Bristol as a city and as a nightlife centre.
The only way you can put a negative spin on it if you start comparing the new venues to the old venues.
People have always seen clubbing as like a necessity. You know, people need to go out and dance.
I think Bristol's pretty good at, if something closes down, something else is going to open up.
Bristol does what Bristol does.
In terms of the Bristol venue climate at the moment, it's obviously an evolving situation. I think it's probably fair to say more venues are closing than are opening. I guess the onus is on promoters and for creative people to try and get new spaces, to try and argue the fact that venues are closing, speak to the council, work with the licensing team and try and argue the case that new places need to open, be that permanently or as pop-ups.
I've been here for about 13 years. We've lost about 10 nightclubs since I've been here. We've only had about 3 open so far. So it's, I think we're in a bit of a difficult situation, but, promoters are sort of fickle creatures. They'll make it work as best as they can.
I don't want to be dramatic and use words like terrifying, but it's certainly unnerving. I mean, it's a real tough environment to be doing anything within a creative space.
I do feel quite sad about, obviously we lost Blue Mountain. That's like a legendary sort of venue in Bristol.
It was really great when Carney was happening, for those not in the know, St Paul's Carnival, because they would open up to the carnival and sort of have that and La Coast would kind of pair together, so you could go from one to the other, and also just it sort of was a bit of a rite of passage growing up in Bristol to go to a night out in Blue Mountain.
When I started at Blue Mountain, it was brilliant. It was filling up every weekend, so you would have sort of 600-700 people through the door, and every nightclub will have trouble, but it was quite a sort of easygoing venue.
It was a big loss, and I think it was the first real shock that people had, especially in the kind of underground music scene, that these places are not permanent and nowhere is truly fixed in the city. For me, it was a great shame. I do miss it, to be honest.
The current closures have created a kind of new canvas for Bristol to kind of work on and start kind of looking at new venues to open and looking at the current issues that have happened in Bristol, i.e. COVID, prices going up, and general music, the music scene's changing, obviously, always.
I think it's a natural progression. Things change, things always change. There's all like these legendary clubs like the Dugout Club and all these other clubs, Ajax, blah, blah. It's just a thing, they close down, people put houses up, and it moves on to somewhere else. In some ways, it keeps it fresh because clubs need to move, clubs need to evolve, otherwise it stagnates and it just becomes another beer-sodden, sticky carpet venue which people take for granted. It is what it is. And I'm not against it because when you've been in the game long enough, it becomes draining, and there's only so much you can handle before you think, I'll leave it to someone else to deal with. And then you don't want to do it anymore. And you think, well, I've put my life and soul into this project. There's marriages have been broken, children growing up without parents, that kind of thing.
It's trying to find a balance, I suppose. And it's difficult because
you know, if you're the person that owns that building, you know, it very much depends on that individual. Maybe they're an older individual, they, you know, want to cash in. You know, maybe the Blue Mountain's a good example. The guy owned it for a long time, and I don't begrudge him wanting to sell up, you know, and you have to have the money, you know. So it's a you can see it from both ways, you know.
Yeah, I think you always have to take into account the fact that the owners of the club obviously have their own thought about what they want to do, whether that's the right like kind of direction or not. It's, you know, you can't tell someone that they can't take loads of money to turn their place into flats. If that's what they want to do, then, you know.
Old Crown Court's first place where I really started to get booked regularly by Stefan, where also I learned quite a lot about promotion, but also as a venue it's just wicked. Like, it's a raw raving experience which was really unique to Old Crown Courts, and I don't think we replicated for quite a long time.
The Old Crown Courts is a sort of multi-use space in the city centre. It was based over a Victorian courthouse and underground prison. So we had 3 courtrooms upstairs and then a small underground prison complex. Did everything from doing airsoft in the day to escape rooms, TV filming, audio filming. It was always going to have a shelf life there. The original lease was, I think, around 5 years, and that was 15 years ago. So it got a lot longer run than it should have, and we threw some amazing parties in there. It was relatively untouched since the Victorian era, and it had its own sort of charm to it. So it is quite sad that it closed down.
Gentrification's always been a bit of an ongoing thing, especially anywhere where artists have, you know, made a place cool, and we're usually attracted because of the cost of living being less. So it's been ongoing probably for centuries, if not longer.
It's a tricky one, really, because it has its pros and cons. You know, the reason why it exists is because cities are trying to, you know, evolve. And also means that, you know, richer people are moving to those areas, which therefore means prices increase and everything. There was the riots, the Tesco riots, where there's a new Tesco opened up Stokes, like middle of Gloucester Road, and all the locals just hated it because there'd never been anything like this before. And that was the first kind of real sign of gentrification in the city, in an area that had otherwise been previously untouched.
That's the classic, you know, you get a rough area, you build some warehouses, you have parties, people buy it for cheap, gentrify it and make them into coffee shops, and then the prices for rent shoots up, and then 10 years later all the people that are going clubbing have now got kids and don't want noise, but that's the culture that they initially moved in and that made their house prices whack up.
Is it fair that happens? Is it fair that actually nightlife isn't important because we want to build this high-rise flat with 50 flats in for could be holiday homes?
It's kind of like a sad cycle that's been going on for a long time, and how you combat it comes down to, you know, urban planning and taking a bit more of a community view of how a city is going to develop, really.
When you have a university inbuilt with a city, like, there's obviously a lot of pros and cons with having loads of students from all parts of the country to come down and feed into the Bristol ethos and stuff. And I feel like, you know, the hugely vast majority of us do definitely feed into the city. But when it comes to gentrification, as like the city, you know, the city that was here before all of the university kind of stuff, I can't say that we necessarily help the problem. I think Stokescroft is a good example of that. Even in the time that I've been here, it's gone from being like, you know, the area of Stokescroft being like the cultural centre and all this kind of stuff to having a new build of flats, like with the planning permission going through right on the corner.
Gentrification does have an impact. I think it will have more of an impact on things like the rave scene, club nights, people that want to have their own sound system events, things like St Paul's Carnival. It's adapting to everybody's needs, keeping everybody happy. Bristol's meant to be a vibrant, like, integrated, cohesive city.
I mean, gentrification in essence is it's unstoppable. The most important thing is that however it progresses, everyone in the community can take part in that. Things will always regenerate, things will always move forward, but there's a number of key steps you need to take to make sure that whichever direction you go in, everyone around you still holds space and influence over what you bring into it. And that's something that we're really, really eager to do here and, make a real conscious effort to bring on board. This is not just a space that caters towards one specific group moving into an area. I think certain places can have that presentation, but it's really important that whatever you bring here caters towards everyone.
I must say, I'm not feeling as bad about it as the average person, because where I come from doesn't have non-gentrified bits. So I'm just very used to, cities being more or less gentrified en masse. Obviously, I wouldn't be happy if, let's say, Stokescroft or Gloucester Road would start changing from like an old, cute or Clifton, something like that, and they become more of a Temple Mead surrounding area. That wouldn't be great, in my opinion, because that's where the character is.
But there's places like the PRSC on Stokescroft, so the People's Republic of Stokescroft, where companies can invest money into those to kind of keep those open. I think that's a really important part of actually, yes, there's going to be gentrification and more houses are going to be built, spaces are going to change, but it's about keeping those kind of key community buildings open.
There are some examples, in Amsterdam's quite a good one, of Berlin, where the gentrification has been kind of stopped to kind of hold on to the identity of the place.
What's coming in terms of businesses and independent businesses, obviously Bristol is famous for having I think it's got the highest density of independent businesses in the UK per capita. I mean, that's positive, right?
There's nothing bad about gentrification per se, I think. It's only if it comes at an expense of the community or a whole area's character.
There's so many factors involved, and things like, like I say, like rent and property development and the council and neighbours complaining and all that sort of thing has a massive effect on the scene.
It's lovely that loads of people want to move to Bristol and want to have a home here. However, I do feel that the housing and the way property is now being developed around venues is really problematic.
There's been lots of office spaces that have been turned into houses. I mean, there's most notably, look at what's happening with Lakota, which at some point will become housing. I think it's inevitable, really. There's a lot of money to be made in converting and selling, city centre buildings or converting them into flats. But the danger, of course, is you lose the whole reason people move to the city in the first place.
Student flats have gone up now, loads of them. It's sort of 6-storey building. We used to do a stage there, and we'd have Lakota Gardens as a stage. That place, the stage, would fit like 1,200 people now. And it's just part of Stokescroft. My memories coming to uni is that being just this open, abandoned thing.
When I heard that Lakota was getting planning permission to be turned into flats, I campaigned against it because of how crucial it is. I managed to get the petition, I think, 6,000 signatories in the space of like 2 or 3 days, and also wrote to the Planner magazine just to sort of highlight the fact that you're not getting rid of like just a random club full of like people doing drugs or whatever. You're getting rid of such a massive part of Bristol's culture. Bristol, without its like music scene, would probably be nothing. It's what people come from and what people stay for.
Let's go dancing. I wanna go dancing with you all night dancing. Let's go dancing.
Bristol is such a student-orientated city that they need student accommodation, and sort of student accommodation becomes a priority over nightlife. working in different cities and different venues within different cities, I see it across the board, whether it's London, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds.
You know, when you put up buildings and you convert office block, try and make sure they're insulated. Don't just put them up so you can get the maximum return on your building. Because, you know, our problem is 5102. It's not insulated. It's terribly. It's just office blocks being converted to flats.
Trinity's been threatened. One was threatened 2 years ago when I was writing this article and doing this project by a lot of developments in Old Market. And like what developers will do is, so for example, Trinity has very heavy dub nights. It's a big part of what Trinity do, and also it's an essential part of sound system culture. Is once again, thanks to the Windrush generation and their descendants, a major part of Bristol's history and Bristol's culture, and Bristol will be nothing without it. So it's a really important legacy to keep on. But developers will go there and do a noise test during the day when it's, you know, also a community venue, and then, you know, nighttime comes around and they've done their noise test already, and they say, yeah, we can put this flat up. People go and live in the flat, they're able to make noise complaints. The noise complaints can shut down the club.
Trinity's always been in a weird place where we've got lots of surrounding communities. We're in between St Paul's, Lawrence Hill, Old Market. We're kind of just in this strange middle area. So we've always had close residents. We've always we work closely with those residents to make sure they're as happy as can be and we can continue doing what we do. There's always kind of added pressures of new developments. So the police station is one of those at the moment. It's been going on for the last few years. We're not against it. I mean, we see the need for housing. If it needs to happen, fine. It's just how can we work together to make sure, again, venues anywhere can carry on doing what they're doing and what they do best.
Let's go dancing. I wanna go dancing with you all night dancing. Let's go dancing. I wanna go dancing with you all night dancing. Let's go dancing.
I mean, it's really hard to determine because, you know, economic interests always win over cultural or community interests. It's just one of those horrible facts of life unless you're kind of your council or your government decides to put more of a value on that. Yeah, but ultimately, unless those things are protected, unless that culture is protected, then it will sadly just be forced further out and you'll see less of it, which is, you know, then the people that moved here because of the scene and because of the image will just find this kind of postcard version where it's actually quite hard to find what they came here looking for in a way.
I take some encouragement with what happened at, you know, Motion or Ministry of Sound initially. They were battling to get something called a deed of easement or agent of change. So if somebody comes in and is converting a building into flats, the emphasis is on them to soundproof it, not on a venue that's already there to deal with the sound. So that's encouraging. So I would hope that, you know, if that happened here, we would be able to, and given the history of the venue and the fact that so many people know it, I would hope that we would get a good amount of local support.
Obviously, what we saw with COVID is we were shut for a long time, and in that period we had, I think it was like a stamp duty holiday, which caused a lot of people to move around. So, you know, people that never sort of knew we were here suddenly were like really exposed to this. You know, I deal with, you know, a lot of the complaints sort of head on sometimes that we get about noise. You know, we've got a system where they can come to us directly and not through the council. And, you know, some of these people think like, you know, on a Saturday afternoon at the end of May, they should be able to sit in their garden and hear nothing. And I don't think that's possible, you know. So I think it's just having a bit of a tolerance and understanding and loving the city as well.
So depending on how you look at it and who you ask, we're either the oldest or the second oldest nightclub in the UK. So opened in the early 60s. Everybody knows this venue as something because it's been here for 60 years, of any age. So I like the fact that I can have a conversation with someone in their 70s about when they came here in the 60s, or someone, you know, who came here in the 80s. So it's nice, you know, it has got a rich history. And there's a little row of clubs. Obviously, they've changed over the years, but there's two next door to us effectively as well, which one's a cocktail bar now, but it was a club until 5 or 6 years ago. But there's no small multi-roomed independent venues like ours left. You know, you can think of other independent clubs, but there's Crofters Rights, which is similar but different in terms of where it is, obviously, and the layout. And I think us being in the city centre both helps and hinders. You know, there's a Stokes Croft mentality, but then there's a city centre Clifton mentality. But if you look at students, there's, you know, I think we hopefully benefit from both. I think the big difference is where venues are opening, because city centres are getting, you know, it's hard to have a club in the city centre, and I think the ones that are there, once they go, they won't be replaced in the city. So all the ones that are opening, other than Strange Brew actually, are happening in more industrial areas.
Well, when we were looking for somewhere to set up, the first thing you look for is somewhere where you're not going to have noise issues like flats upstairs or you know, within earshot. And there was literally nowhere else other than this place that we found. And the only reason it works here is because we've got a multi-storey car park upstairs, and everywhere around is commercial, you know, offices and shops. I honestly don't think that there's anywhere else in the centre you could do something like this, which is a shame, because there's a real need to change high streets and move away from retail-dominated high streets to more cultural hubs where other things happen. I mean, I don't know anything about the SWX stuff other than what was in the news. I know someone's been charged for arson and that they were kind of possibly involved in some other attempts of arson.
Story, as far as I've kind of got it, there was a sort of a young troubled individual who wasn't too happy with nightclubs opening during a pandemic. Letters were sent threatening, and then I guess he actioned it, you know, a few days later.
Yeah, I was just kind of, when that happened, I remember sitting in here and like there was smoke billowing out of one of the fire escapes, and like days after it had happened. So it's been like a huge operation getting it back in shape. I know they're still doing work now.
You know, thankfully they caught him in enough time before he managed to cause any more damage to the Bristol music scene. Because, you know, losing SWX is a huge venue in the city centre. But it looks like they're back on track to open in September, so that's great.
I took this place over on my own a couple of years ago in 2019. It's got spaces that can have breakout rooms, we can have lots of live music, and it just screamed to me as a great venue. And then when I was finally like, I'm ready, I'm here, Cloak and Dagger, we're here, lockdown happened.
We got the keys in January 2020, and then the lockdown hit in March, so we really had to, like, you know, rebudget everything that we had planned.
During lockdown, COVID, venues were still having to pay rates and rent. And then when they come back to sort of having their business reopened, they've then got to contend with actually complaints. You know, I remember being at Blue Mountain and before they closed, and they had multiple complaints. And, you know, at one point we're being sort of told that they could be facing a fine for sort of breaching noise regulations.
Well, originally we were meant to close in February, I think it was like 2018. And a week before we met shut, they turned around to us and said, we're not ready. So it made us look a bit like idiots because we've done all the closing parties and everyone just said it was a con. It wasn't a con. They weren't ready and they said, well, you must just keep going. It was nice to have that. The only disappointment I found in the whole process is that we had to close during COVID. Obviously, we just did sit-down events. You know, we did what we could, made it as much as a club experience as we can.
Yeah, I mean, it was awful. You know, we lost all of our income. It literally absolutely ripped the heart out of us, really. You know, luckily we had some funds that we could apply to with the Arts Council, which massively helped us through. But I mean, in terms of, you know, the financial impact, it's massive. I mean, we're going to be sort of paying it off for like the next 5 or 6 years, really.
We got some cultural recovery fund during the pandemic, So it kind of allowed us to maintain that point of momentum a little bit and do some more improvements. So it's kind of come back kind of stronger and better equipped than before, fortunately, which was a kind of luck of the draw situation, I think, in many ways.
Throughout lockdown, you had High Rise, which was incredible and just showed what you can do if you just put your mind to it and find random locations and get the vibe right and get everything on point, location, advertising, marketing. That for me was quite inspiring and showed what you can do with kind of a pandemic.
When we had the sit-down events, which were both a blessing and a curse at the same time, that's when we did 100 shows in 9 months or something like that. That then led to more volume of noise over a smaller amount of time, which did lead to several noise complaints, which did end up leading us to lose our license. That then led to huge gaps when other clubs like the Black Swan and I think even Blue Mountain was open at that time briefly, and Lakota would open and we weren't. When we did get our licence back, we'd had a break from it. The kind of saturation of events had almost died down a bit, so it was almost like people got really excited to come back again after 6 weeks of us not having our licence.
We're putting in to make this place work and to be open for people, and you'd feel like you'd got it right, and then the rules change and then you got to start all over again. Yeah, full credit to every venue team because people need that.
I think that's a lovely thing that happened out of COVID was that everyone's talking to each other, communicating, how are you getting on, are you okay? Promoters are event planners, they're planners, they've got logistics, they know about strategizing, they know about finance. And so I think you just move those skills into another way.
In the pandemic as well, I think a lot of people were like, what the hell's my job? What am I doing? Where a lot of people kind of changed avenues or their profession or what they're doing. But it's great to see it kind of spring back. And I think during that time, people were like, how can I use my space in a new way? So we used our outside space, where we put up a stretch tent, just like kind of High Rise did as well, and Lakota did. It's like, right, okay, we can't do things inside, or we're limited inside. How can we use spaces in new ways?
We were the first city really doing live music, live DJs, sit down sort of thing, and everyone started to do the same thing after that. We went into lockdown, 20th of March in 2020, something like that. About 3 weeks later, James Haggart, who used to be managing director here, he had got the plan for Lakota Gardens like that, all ready to go, everything like that. I remember speaking to mates in Newcastle and places like that, and Manchester and up north, in Norwich and stuff, and they were like, oh, this looks wicked, and they were trying to find their own versions of that.
We had to kick someone out for dancing, it was ridiculous, really. We did try some seated stuff, but, and it was okay, but I didn't really, have much enthusiasm for it. So, and then when we reopened, it's gone a bit mental, really.
I guess the obvious thing was that after the pandemic, people were, there was a natural demand for events.
It's about time we ignite. Venues have done really well to bring back audiences and get things back off the ground, reschedule events that have been postponed and then postponed again.
And during lockdown, I really do think that there was some sort of the way we were all here, and at times would link up, through the sit-down parties and stuff. That melting pot over 2 years, I do think really now has created an unstoppable kind of new wave of energy from the underground and the scene in Bristol, like you can see with people starting up these new creative venues. But it's going to be a very difficult time over the next couple of years, and I know that as a label. And I know the venues know that, and everybody else needs to understand that it's a very difficult time for us all right now. And sure, things will get better, and like we've seen with these venues, they're so dedicated that I'm positive that we can get through. But yeah, it's gonna be nuts.
I've always been really impressed with the Bristol community. It's always been
culturally significant for years and years and years, as far back as I can remember, and you can talk to other generations. And I think that's just been there's something in the water here. Like, people are just so creative, so overcoming obstacles and innovating and revolutionising and just being Bristol. I love it so much. And so whilst it is a shame to lose buildings and lose venues and closures, Bristol's going to come out on top. It's always going to make something amazing, and it's just something that has to happen, unfortunately. But Bristol does what Bristol does.
We have also gained some venues, which is great, and I think it kind of just shows sort of like the resilience of the city and the scene, and how much people are willing to help, whether that's even just like the public through crowdfunding. Some venues have done crowdfunding to be able to open or stay open.
It does feel like a new era with Lost Horizon, Prop Yard, Strangebury opening. It's new opportunities, exciting times.
So while it's sad that some venues are they'll go under, whether they retire, whether they're forced out of their lease, where there's space, there's growth, and new venues will always come about. Such as, there's amazing venues like Prop Yard have come about. That, it's 3 warehouses, it's huge, and if done well can rival places like Motion. And I know they're really keen to push that underground sound and all that jazz.
In general, though, I mean, what I've actually seen recently, which I've been surprised by, is a lot of like positive ventures, like the Prop Yard, which is the venue near to me in St Phillips. I'm a big fan of St Phillips area. There is actually quite a lot of cool stuff going on in that respect. I played in Lost Horizon a couple of nights ago, and that's also a really cool venue, like very Bristol style. Like kind of a bit more grotty, not just like all shiny and nice inside necessarily, but a really good club with a really good bar and really good sound system and everything else, a good vibe.
So we're currently sat in a disused car garage. Less than a year ago, from when this was filmed, it was full of cars. We've still got all the parking markings in here, and all of the infrastructure we have on the roof is designed to hang cars from. Luckily, we've been able to reutilize that and add it into the venue space itself. It all kind of married itself up perfectly. The whole team, between us, is well over 100 years of events experience in here. Maybe not myself included. As one of the younger members of the team.
It's been a really interesting one for us because when we started this project, there weren't many venues in Bristol, and we did it through a crowdfunder, which had a really good response, I think, because there was a shortage of venues. But since we've opened, there's been some other venues open up as well, and I think lots of other venues have kind of like changed what they do. So at the moment, it feels like the venue scene is actually fairly healthy. I mean, it's always under threat, but at the moment, it feels like there's enough to go around, definitely. While we were building, given all the difficulties with COVID, we've had a huge amount of help from like tradespeople, from volunteers, anyone that can do anything has to kind of chipped in.
I think like Bristol's, again, historically kind of DIY, whether they be promoters or whether it be a venue. So I think Bristol's always looking for new spaces, using spaces in new ways. It could be like an underground car park, and then using that. Somehow we kind of get the okays to do things like that, which is amazing.
The way I've looked at it, I like to kind of not just use the same spaces over and over again, but try and find new spaces, and I like alternate to move around with different venues to keep things fresh and exciting. One bit of advice that I could give to other promoters is that you don't necessarily have to use a venue that's already licensed. You can get what's called a temporary events notice and do pop-up events. And that gives you license to run an event with conditions that you agree with the council, such as the space behind me. That's how we're running this one. It's essentially an outdoor industrial park with a loading bay area that we're going to fit in with a big stage, a void sound system, a multi-genre lineup in celebration of 10 years of Alternate. We're going to run a large bar, some food stalls. It's an exciting project.
Yeah, you know why they're adaptable? Because when you come from the free party, free festival culture, you have a sound system that you've got to be on the move. The police won't close you down, so you've got to find another site. So you have to be able to think on your feet, and you have to be able to organise logistically what goes A to B from a split second and still throw a party on.
promoters will always come up with ingenious ways on how to throw parties. You know, Alfresco Disco is a great example of that. I mean, these guys, you know, will go and throw a party in, you know, a tennis court or a woodland or, you know, an old hospital. That kind of forward thinking is probably what Bristol needs a little bit more of, especially as we're losing nightclubs so much. But, you know, the scene as a whole, yeah, Bristol is Bristol. It's always going to be a huge hub of music in the city.
Growing up as a Bristolian, like you experience clubs change and shift a lot over the years. So what you might know as an iconic space when you came up in the city still exists as a venue to other people. Something for me where a lot of my misspent youth was probably the Bank, which was loving.
My favourite venue to have closed the last few years was probably the Tube. The Tube used to do some great midweek events, and that's kind of what gave me my education, I guess, when I was a whippersnapper.
It was a really small venue, but they used to get some like really heavy hitting stuff, especially in the dubstep days. I saw like Shackleton in there on a Wednesday night once and just like blew my socks off.
It's kind of the type of venue where you'd go down and you'd network with people and you'd meet other people that were down there. Yeah, so it was great.
Yeah, my favourite venue is definitely the Motorcycle Showroom, which I think was around in the sort of like late noughties to early 2010s. It's more of an art space with like lots of art studios in there, but it had a really open plan downstairs and upstairs, and it was run off temporary events notices, so you only had like a certain number of events a year, so it always felt like a special occasion going there.
That felt amazing in there. That was one that was super memorable for me. When I first moved to the city, I used to go to like Arc Bar quite a lot. It's all a bit of a blur, you know. The years have just melded into one.
The reason why I liked it in there was because, again, you never really knew what you were going into. Some nights it would be like a drum and bass set with live percussion, or it would be a guy with a keyboard and tinfoil hat. The atmosphere in there was always really good fun.
I kind of got a soft spot for Timbuktu, you know, that typical cliche, brickwork tunnel, sweaty venue. One of the rooms, even the DJs had to perform in a cage. It was like playing the Blues Brothers, like you'd imagine bottles of whiskey being thrown at you and stuff. It's amazing. And it was just proper dingy, pure, je ne sais quoi, with jungle and dubstep. Like, yeah, fantastic venue.
Empire Theatre was probably up there. I believe it was an old sex club, so there was, in some of the second room, you could still see some of the chains shackled to the walls and little prison cells they used to shove people. We used to throw some really good parties in there.
I mean, it almost goes without saying, doesn't it? Like Blue Mountain, obviously. As I said, Blue Mountain is like, it's deeply personal. It's, a lot of like my personal like things that have happened in my life happened or were orientated around something to Blue Mountain.
A lot of DJs and like small collectives got their start at Blue Mountain as well. And Clockwork that was attached to it. That was also quite another significant club that kind of made up the Stokes Croft stretch. I've just had very many silly nights at that club.
Me and my friends, we'd go there every Tuesday for years when we first moved to Bristol. Yeah, when I was coming through the ranks as a DJ and producer, even then, like getting bookings there was still the most exciting thing ever. And I'm sure I would still be playing there quite a bit now if it wasn't for that. So I miss it for that reason. And obviously they've moved on to go to Dare to Club now, which I'm really pleased they've managed to find something.
Quite a few of us have moved to Dare too, and hopefully we can bring the Blue Mountain vibe to another venue. Bring a lot of the promoters over and hopefully we can create a mini Blue Mountain.
Jack of Diamonds as well, very silly venue. Did love that club, did love the kind of audacity of kind of still having a stripped club interior, not really changing it much, but being a nightclub. And the fact that we just sold bottles of Buckfast that you could just take whenever you wanted.
We used to go to these little venues like Crystal Dove and all those places in St Paul's, little drinking dens. Basically, when the pub chucked you out, you needed to go somewhere, and it wasn't a rave. What you did was find these clubs in St Paul's that were all night drinking. And there was a lot of free parties. We did a lot of those. So it wasn't a favourite club, it was whatever the night was on that your mates were putting on.
I used to get the train to Temple Meads and I used to walk across Queen Square, go up to Park Street, go to, Replay Records and get my records. So yeah, in that sense, it's Bristol sort of everything to me, really.
My predictions for the future of the Bristol underground scene, I think there'll be a return to roots. I think we'll start finding pop-up spaces in random different areas further out. So we'll be moving out further than the centre, I reckon. It'll become a bit more like, in a way, London, where like the city centre is the more sort of metropolitan, in a way, sort of residential, but all flats kind of thing. And the more interesting areas, the more cultural areas, diverse areas, all this kind of stuff where art can thrive, we'll start moving further and further out as the city builds from the sort of middle outwards.
We're kind of expecting there to be a bit more of maybe a move towards like more local scene stuff. I think there's going to be lots of promoters that can't afford to take the risk on big bookings that might not break even.
Since COVID reopened, people expected this year of like 90s rave madness, like everyone going out, it's just been crazy. And I don't think that's really happened. With underground dance music, I think with COVID and lockdowns, there's like a 2-year almost like a fire break, whereas like people didn't have that link to like what the year above was doing. Or you had a brother at 2 years above that would tell you to go to Lakota or Motion or whatever. I think a lot of people are getting to uni and going for the easy option like Gravity and like Pop World and things like that. It's an easy option. It's what they're almost told to do by the unis. I think right now the underground music scene in Bristol and in other cities is struggling.
The more commercialised sort of stuff that we do has absolutely flown since September specifically. Underground music has taken a hit, but it does seem that the next generation of students, specifically in student cities, such as Bristol, Leeds, Manchester, Nottingham, where your core demographic are students, they do seem to be going to more commercial nights at the moment.
It's that 2-year gap of COVID. I think people didn't have a way to explore dance music because your only option was TikTok or Insta Reels or YouTube streams, and a lot of that wasn't underground. It was almost commercial music. Yeah.
I think the underground music scene will explode again in Bristol. It's not gone anywhere, but it's not as strong, I don't feel, as it was.
Even though, like, what was the underground of Bristol when it was, like, jungle and stuff, and even before that, in, like, the 90s, you had bands like Portishead and Massive Attack. There's, like, such a roots sort of culture there in Bristol that I think we will be all right. And like if you look at the moment at the scene, even though like the jungle and D&B scene are quite sort of stayed in their same sort of place for the last 5 years, it looks like the breakbeat scene's coming through. I know loads of producers that are kind of sick with the current state of things and are pushing it forward.
At the minute, I'm seeing multi-genre nights on their rise up. So I think probably there's going to be more multi-genre nights rather than a night just sticking to drum and bass or dubstep or something like that. There's been a lot of promoters trying to diversify their lineups in one go, with the diversification more so of subgenres and obviously booking diverse lineups. That's still unfortunately a massive issue, and I still see male-only lineups, and it's obviously really annoying.
It needs to come from the top down. Promoters, programmers, venues need to be working on it in all sense, whether it's the venue staffing, the door staffing, the acts they're booking. They need to be like booking diversely and also booking or working with, promoters that are diverse.
You need more women doing the running around, being directors of companies, doing all the things that are being in charge, basically. Because by having more women, you're naturally opening yourself up to, the other communities that are feeling underrepresented. Anyone, it's not just women, it's anyone who is slightly different, who is not of the mass. culture who is slightly, subculture. If you're in the wrong group at the wrong time, should you feel in danger? Should you feel that you're not safe? And that's a no. It's a big no. It doesn't matter where you are. So yeah, it does upset me, but I can see why, because it's the culture, it's the drinking culture, it's like it's corporate, it's commercial, so it's a reflection. Any corporate society, really.
But also, I think equally as important is like people need to be actually going and speaking to these communities, like speaking to queer communities or like BIPOC communities and being like, what could we do in our venue or at our event to make you feel more comfortable?
Yeah, the Conquer events are really interesting because they started here and there's only been 2 of them and they've kind of already got a really good reputation. Although they are great for diversity and things, for us they're just incredible events, and it's just always really refreshing to work with people who are really imaginative about what they do and make spaces that are fun and inclusive at the same time. That's like a really important thing to get right.
I know that music is linked to capitalism and linked to the monetization of like the art form and everything, and I am part of that along with everybody else. But I am in this because I love it and because I love being part of something like a culture that gave me something to like grab hold of and be a part of. And the underground is so strong like that like I am a part of that, and like that, and I see a lot of us as who are very much part of that, like relentlessly underground and independent, and we want to keep building and also kind of like protecting a little bit what's ours. And if at times not like being like aggressive in a way that where we're going to like fight people, but like aggressive in terms of like, yeah, like we will play music on the streets, we will play music at free parties, we will run events in creative ways and do things differently and play music loud, and that's the culture is strong in Bristol for that, and it's growing again, I think, because of the current climate. There is a massive reaction.
I think the free party scene will have a grand resurgence in the coming years, although I know it's already very strong. I think there is definitely an undercurrent of sort of political beliefs that are proliferating at the moment that's sort of, definitely align with the free party identity. And frankly, as clubs become too expensive to do events in, like, what else you're still going to have a good time somewhere, right? Where are you going to go? You're not going to go to a pub, you can't really afford it. You can't really go to a club unless it's like something you really, 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 really like. So maybe just, I don't know, hop in a car, hop on a train, get on a bike, and just find some speakers in a field and spend a night or the night and day there.
It's so rooted in sound system culture that, like, if you've got a good rig, no matter what you play, if it's got bass playing, like, people are going to show up.
The underground scene in Bristol, like I was just saying to some of the younger kind of student promoters, some of the younger promoters who are coming out at the moment, like, we've got some great people coming through. Promoters, some of the new venues have great people working with them. I feel confident, man.
I always think it has such a resilience, and the people that work in the scene and the artists and every part of the scene has always been resilient. As long as like spaces can survive, I'm pretty positive for the future.
The scene in Bristol will do what it's always done, and that's innovate, pioneer new sounds, continue to bring new talent through, continue to attract people from all over the world.
The city is a place of culture, after all. It's noted as being one of the places in the UK to go if you want to experience culture, and it will always remain the same. In terms of venues, we've all heard the rumours about some of the bigger clubs closing. It can look bleak at times, but one thing that we've demonstrated here and other places like the Blue Mountain guys are there too is that the heart of the city will never die when it comes to underground music. We're all kind of the same when it comes to events. Everyone's got the same heart. Everyone wants to get people in through the door. Doesn't matter if it's music, chess, gaming, and anything in the city, people always have the same outlook, which is to entertain people.
The culture will survive in whatever way, shape, or form. It will always survive. That much we know. Just about how, well, that'll be seen.
What does Bristol's music scene mean to you?
Oh, so much. One of the reasons why I moved here. One of the reasons why I never left.
It's kind of everything, really. It's my life, and I love the city.
It's opportunity. When I came here, I came to uni as an excuse to get into the Bristol music scene, and I've never left since.
The music was beating heart of Bristol, really.
Bristol's music scene has just got the closest space to my heart. It is just the place. It's the city I always come back to for anything and everything. It's the city I've been coming to since I was a kid. It's the city I chose to live in. It's the city I chose to, settle down in.
It's everything. It's my work. It's my life. It's my friends. It's my colleagues.
Bristol music scene's booming, mate, and I don't think it ever will stop being as big as it is.
Music creators, promoters, music enjoyers, everything in between and everything beyond. It can all live entirely in Bristol, symbiotically, and it's beautiful.
You're always seeking those life-affirming moments, and you can get them in Bristol.
Bristol's music scene is, it's the one, isn't it?